Welcome to Season 2 of the Weird in High School Video Podcast. On this episode, we are joined by Mike Spencer, who is the founder of both the Geomatic Attic and of the Wide Skies Music Festival. In this episode, we chat about the inception of the festival and of the Geomatic Attic, and Mike shares what drives him to do what he does for the local music scene and the pride he feels contributing to a vibrant and thriving arts community in Lethbridge.
So we just arrived on the 5th floor of the Lethbridge Park and Ride. Facility used by the city for, obviously its transit facility downstairs. It's a transit hub for the city, but they've made this into a parking structure, and they've just recently added like electrical charging stations. So I think they've got big hopes for this building, but they've never really filled this top area. So about 4 or 5 years ago, they approached me and the Geomatic Attic about, would we want to do an event up here? And when it first came up here, I thought, not sure, but the more you think about it, it was kind of the whole idea of like music being played on the rooftop by the Beatles and U2 and things that stick in your mind and having a real wow factor. And I think people have kind of gravitated to that whole idea. Yeah. And we really encourage people to bring lawn chairs to kind of add to that festival feel as well. And people have really kind of enjoyed doing that because, they've created an atmosphere just by being in that sort of situation. So we'll have probably, our capacity is about 450 people, but, we'll probably have between 300 and 400 people each night. So Monday, July 28th, Tuesday, July 29th, and Wednesday, July 30th. We'll probably top out over 1,000 people for the 3 days. Yeah, because each one of the nights is a little bit different. Monday night is, I would say, kind of more leaning into like an alt country feel with Shayla Miller and the Sadies. Tuesday night is, I would call it more of a kind of a rock world music kind of feel with Kim Churchill from Australia and the Boom Booms, who have traveled the world and have, I would say, they touch on, rock and roll, but also some reggae, R&B, really cool, danceable vibe throughout that evening. Wednesday night is an absolutely killer night because we've got Wesley, Haitian group living in Montreal, but they're really leaning into kind of a French reggae styling. And then Blue Moon Marquee should get equal billing on that evening too. They're a really cool blues band from Vancouver Island, and they kind of almost play a bit of a ragtime barrel house style of blues. And to me, that's got a major wow factor and introducing people who haven't seen these bands here in Lethbridge before. I think the whole idea really is to push the boundaries a little bit and to kind of give people something different to hear. That's always been kind of one of our goals, is to give access to a wide variety of music. And I love the idea of kind of people walking away and going, wow, I never even thought I liked that kind of music, but I do. And, that kind of permeates really what we want people to walk away having an experience they didn't expect.
Cool. A gentleman is someone who plays banjo but doesn't. I decided a long time ago I was happy to be gentleman adjacent. Just buy glasses that make you look threatening. Play the banjo in public and don't hurt anyone. That's kind of how I base my whole persona. Yeah. Well, lots of folks got nothing in his empty place. I was never a great talker, but that just don't add up. But you'll never catch me working, won't catch me in the field. I don't want to be a doctor, I won't live that many years, won't be dangerous, won't be dangerous. Wanna be a dangerous man. When I love me my bank, and I serve myself well. And I love me my mirror, and the truth they can tell. When I put houses in the dirt, and cold weather's yeah. If a long man still walking, then I ain't been yet. I'm a danger, I'm a danger, I'm a dangerous man. But I'm a danger, I'm a danger, I'm a dangerous man. Well, I always thought I'd go down in a hell ladder. When they took me out of sleeping, now my weight changed instead. Well, there ain't no worse face than Padre John found. No, there ain't no worse face than Padre John found. 'Cause first you swing a hammer, but then you swing a cap. And when the rocks broke up, here lies danger, here lies dangerous man. But here lies danger, here lies danger, here lies dangerous man.
Yeah, before rolling, we were talking about some of the community that exists around the music scene and how it really isn't that big. How did you get into it? Tanner was telling me a little bit of the origin of the Geomatic Attic, that it was born out of a separate business, and you decided to start having shows there. How did that story begin?
Well, kind of, I'd like to say there was like a big business plan, but not at all. It really started because of having friends that were putting on house concerts, and these friends had actually done a few, but committed to a show that then they realized that they'd double booked themselves, and asked me if I would be interested in having the house concert at a space above my workplace. And we had started calling it the Geomatic Attic because I'm in the geomatics field, like my day job, the one where I actually earn money. And so we put on a house concert in this little attic space, which was kind of a space with rock and roll posters and file cabinets and a pool table and old couches. But surprisingly enough, the first house concert we did worked out really well. And, we talked earlier too about community, about how you get a taste of that and you really like it and you want to do it again. So we did, I think it was 2008. We did the first one that we did as a favor. And by the way, I think we charged $10, gave people a slice of pizza and a beer to come see the show. And then that same year, I think we did 5 shows. And then we had to get serious and get a real sound system. And it kind of took off from there, because you realize that it wasn't really that difficult to get musicians to play, just because most musicians are just looking for a place to play music. And, they'd play at maybe a larger space that can generate more revenue. But if it's a weird night, they'll come play on a Monday, Tuesday. And, I was just absolutely shocked by the level of musician you could get to come play a small space. And that's kind of how it started.
Who are some highlights from your 10 years of shows at the Geomatic Attic?
Well, I'd have to say, the first one was, my group of friends, we were all big fans of kind of the folk festival scene. And one of the guys that we'd seen a lot was Fred Eaglesmith, and Canadian icon, probably one of the hardest touring musicians of the last 30 years. And Fred, we'd got to know him a little bit, but we asked him to play that first year, and he actually came, not really knowing what he was getting into. And it built a kind of a lifelong friendship with him, and I think we've probably done 7 or 8 concerts with Fred over the years. And that was definitely probably one of the very first highlights. But there's so many. Another one I always talk about is at our little venue, the Geomatic Attic, which wasn't the original one. It was kind of a new, improved version. We booked Ron Sexsmith, who's usually considered one of Canada's best songwriters. And in fact, Paul McCartney and I believe Elvis Costello note Ron Sexsmith as their favorite songwriter. But Ron Sexsmith came and he played at the Geomatic Attic, a little 100-seat theater, 3 weeks after he played at the Royal Albert Hall. And I remember getting up on stage and and introducing Ron Sexsmith and saying, I can't really believe this, but Ron just played the Royal Albert Hall, one of the most renowned music venues in the world, 3 weeks ago, and now he's here with you guys effectively in our living room. It was just kind of like that. Yeah, there's moments like that where so many bands that I maybe didn't know so much about and turned out to be fantastic. Groups like Lee Harvey Osmond. There's a project by Tom Wilson, the founder of Junkhouse and part of Blackie and the Rodeo Kings, coming to play a small place. Kerry Rodriguez from Texas was one of my favorite early shows. And a lot of the people that are local musicians that have gone on and done some great things, people like Ryland Morantz and John Ward Hannum, Leroy Stagger, just sort of getting to know them and kind of giving them a venue to play, and then seeing how well they've done touring around the world. That's such a big highlight for me, is that you kind of give them a little bit of a stepping stone. But another one was the Sheepdogs. They played at a small outdoor event that we had at the time we called the Summer Blast Off. And the Sheepdogs opened for the Sadies, and the Sheepdogs were part of a contest that was put on by Rolling Stone magazine, and they were, they went through the process. They weaned them down to, the quarterfinals and the semifinals, and they were the finalists of the Rolling Stone Band of the Year contest, I guess they must have called it, and we paid them $200 to play, and the next week they won the contest and were on the front cover of the Rolling Stone magazine. So we'll never book them again. Well, at least not at that space. They would probably command, some really big dollars, like in the 50 grand range probably. And not that we couldn't book them, but you'd have to rethink our whole model. But we paid them $200 and they were happy to play it, and they just, knocked it out of the park.
That story is funny just because it's such a testament to how kind of random the nature of success can be in this world. Like I had just gone down to Montana for the Under the Big Sky Festival, which is incredibly busy, but Nolene Hoffman from Bow Island was playing, and she was, until right before her explosion, just one of the people around in Alberta. I had played this weird gig that she played at some guy's elk ranch outside of Black Diamond, like the year before the year before that. Now she's touring with Winona Judd, so it's those kinds of stories exist. And it's maybe that's the same gamble that everyone's doing. It keeps you invested in the pursuit to think that maybe tomorrow's the day that happens.
Yeah, I always feel like for every band there must be kind of like a tipping point moment that they can identify where things really got good or success really translated. Another one was the Strumbellas. Ontario group, really great, really sonic, musically sounding group, almost kind of like Mumford and Sons, that kind of big sound. They played at the Geomatic Attic, again, 100 seats theater, and great group. And I'm sure we probably paid them $1,500. But I believe the next year, or at least 2 years later, they're playing at Calgary Folk Fest and they're making like 50 grand. And so, while it would be difficult for them to say, hey, you want to come back to the Geomatic Attic, to see that they actually translated really well and we got them at a great time, that's really cool.
That kind of story too ends up informing a space. I have a buddy in Nashville who said you have to go play the mic at the Springwater. Townes Van Zandt played there, and all these legends. And I go down there, and it's one of the crustiest places I've been in my life. And I texted him, "Where did you send me?" And he said, "Don't hate on it. Townes Van Zandt has stood where you're standing."
Right. Yeah, that'd be kind of almost like times changed in Winnipeg.
Exactly.
Probably.
Yeah.
It's such a well-known name, and so many great performers have played there. But there's nothing to it. Like, it's tiny and it's kind of. Yeah, it's
nicer than the Springwater.
Yeah.
There is something to that, though. Even just in Lethbridge, Tanner and I have this conversation about Calgary, that he says when he moved to Calgary, the population was 800,000 people, and there were 6 good venues. And now the population is 2 million people, and there's maybe 3 venues. Which I can think of at least 3 decent venues, including Geomatic Attic in Lethbridge. What do you feel like causes Lethbridge to punch above its weight class in music, and to be somewhere that these people like you're talking about do want to come play? Why is this a town that not only turns out its own swath of high quality musicians, but also has an audience that high quality musicians want to come and play for?
Good question. It wasn't always that way. I mean, Lethbridge I would have considered it kind of a wasteland as well, probably in the 90s, like early 90s. I think there's like little things that we had that kind of allowed us to, South Country Fair, I believe, is a really important one. a really great, small music festival in Fort Macleod. I think that kind of allowed different musicians, like really crazy mixture of musicians, to come through Fort Macleod, and people from here maybe got a bit of a musical education through South Country Fair. It really helps to have the university and the college here, so you've got a bit of a younger crowd that are kind of seeking something different and new. And it doesn't hurt that I think we kind of hit the sweet spot with the musicians that we had in the city. Like people that I just mentioned, like John Ward Hannum, Dave McCann, Leroy Stagger, Shayla Miller. And now I can't even keep track of the amount of great bands or, up and coming bands that are here in the city. And I think it kind of parallels what happened in Winnipeg and Halifax. There are a couple of places that always get mentioned. And Lethbridge seems to be going through like a really cool period of time where, we're developing some amazing groups and, diverse groups as well. And which is weird because Lethbridge is generally a pretty conservative town. At its core it kind of is, but I think we've got a really thriving music scene, and it's exciting what's happening here.
I think a big part of that too, there's a lot of parallel to draw between Winnipeg and Lethbridge, and Halifax is, I don't know, I'm wondering if Halifax's day has passed in that regard, but that's funny too, because I had just watched an old Much Going Coastal about Sloan, but I think part of it is a college town, which means that there are people to start bands. And then there's also what I certainly noticed here compared to elsewhere is that if you are a student at ULETH and you're looking for a place to go out on the weekend, like the Owl is a pretty reliable venue for that, and it's a venue with live music compared to in a lot of the bigger cities. Even UBC Okanagan's a comparable sized university, but that's not the energy in Kelowna. That's all the bars playing the Unz music.
Yeah.
So I think even the fact that the thing to do, the local watering holes here, are these places for live music, makes a big difference too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How do you see the next, say, 10 years of the scene going? Do you see Lethbridge putting itself on the map further in a national context?
It's possible. It's you kind of have to have like the venues are so important, and you really need the gritty ones like the Slice and the Owl. Those are so important, and they're the ones that younger people are usually drawn to. So you got to keep that going. And then there's, places like the Geomatic Attic, which is more of a sort of sit down, listen, more of a listening room. And then you sort of graduate up to, the Yates. I'm concerned a little bit about how many tribute bands end up playing, a city like Lethbridge. And I think it's really important to be able to push the envelope with people's thinking to say, let's go and see something that we don't know anything about. I worry that people don't think that way enough, that they want to go and listen to the old standbys. They'll go and listen to, an Abbott tribute band and a Pink Floyd tribute band, which there's nothing wrong with any of it. It's just, it's not a new experience. And that's one of the things that I think is important for when we do this, and South Country does what they do, and the Owl and the Slice brings in people. But I think promoters have to be really savvy about what's happening in the music scene and try to pick off bands that are current and fresh, and then we get to a point where we could start talking about Lethbridge as one of the iconic music cities, because you just can't fall back on the same old. You got to want to have those new bands that are pushing the envelope, and there's so many right now. Like, the music business or scene is incredible. Like, there's a lot of great musicians. It's just we got to find a way to bring them here and then get the word out about how good they are. And and I think a lot of it depends on promoters, like people who are willing to take a chance. And the problem is it's really risky. It's risky to take a chance on like an act that's wanting 20 grand, because then you've got to find a venue that you can put enough bums in seats, and are they going to want to pay $50, $60, $70? I mean, that's not the only thing. There's lower level stuff, but you got to have all the different venues to be able to be like a true wide-ranging music scene that covers all elements of our population.
Yeah, I think even an aspect of, if we dig into the homegrown music scene here, even so many of the nights at the Palomino in Calgary have, I don't know, a disproportionate amount of Lethbridge bands on the bill.
Oh, really?
And
yeah.
I think one aspect of it is, if you even consider that, now I know it's getting more expensive here, but the average price of a single family home in Calgary is exceeding $700,000. Where do you jam? If your kid is growing up in a townhouse, do they get to learn to play drums? So even the fact that, like Lethbridge and Winnipeg, which we've mentioned, I think the fact that you've got the student population here even, and they are, renting a house somewhere, and they can have a jam space in the basement, or, I can think of, in the case of Biloxi Parish, who were one of my favorite Lethbridge bands, the fact that Cole's parents' basement was available as a jam space probably makes a difference in the trajectory.
For sure.
And it's interesting too to me that it seems like I know it exists here, but the trends seem to maybe impact this place a little less severely, and I don't know if that's just demography or what it is, but there does seem to, there are still bands coming out of this town compared to just solo acts and rappers and DJs. And
right. Yeah, I think you might have hit the nail on the head there, actually, because like we spoke about earlier, like Calgary and Vancouver is another great example of, they don't have a lot of really obvious great venues for the size of the city, and they're both really expensive places to live, and Toronto would be the same. I saw a documentary about Broken Social Scene within the last year, and when they started, I think in the early 2000s, that's back when Leslie Feist was part of it, and a lot of other great musicians. But Toronto was actually kind of affordable then, and they were all like swapping out rehearsal space amongst in the inner city of Toronto. But now those places are like, they're unaffordable. Musicians generally at that beginning level don't have tons of money, so they're pushed further and further out. But yeah, I think it's a good point about Lethbridge. It's still relatively affordable, and there's places to play, and but it feeds off each other. A lot of these bands will play or a lot of the performers will play in multiple bands as well. So that kind of, we might have 50 bands in here, but two people from every band plays in two other bands. Yeah. And I think that part was always really cool.
We did an episode on Bailey Kate and an episode on Star Painter, and we were able to shoot them at the same time because they're mostly the same people. And then you have these moments like Richard, who plays in Fawns. I didn't know that he was playing with
I can't even remember which one of the two bands he was playing bass in, but you get to know, and it's that same community thing we were talking about, where it becomes in a lot of ways one big family, and sometimes that brings with it the same issues as a real family, where one brother's a bleep and you can't escape them, but it certainly does work out in that way.
I hope you enjoyed part 1 of our interview with Mike Spencer. Stay tuned for part 2 in the next installment of the Weird in High School video podcast.